Hello and welcome to TVP World News. Main edition, you're watching World News tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw, Poland. With me, Anna Kalczyńska. Good evening. Could American membership in NATO come with strings attached? In his first televised interview as the president-elect, Donald Trump refused to commit to staying in NATO, but said the United States would remain in the alliance if it was treated fairly. We'll come back to this in just a minute, but first let's take a look at the headlines. Assad's rule come to an end with the Syrian leader fleeing the country as rebels stormed Damascus. He has reportedly found refuge in Russia. And protests in Georgia continue as reports of unmarked masked men rise in Tbilisi. Still, the spirit among the protesters remain high. And Poland spins up its own munitions manufacturing. Defense companies have signed an investment agreement. Bashar al-Assad bloody regime is over. Rebel forces took control of the Syrian capital, Damascus, in a lightning-fast campaign as Assad's allies, Russia and Iran, watched the country be taken over. Assad has reportedly found refuge in Russia. Experts warn that although it may look like a success for the Syrian people, more violence could follow. Marek Steele reports.
The takeover of Syria by rebel forces has become reality. A reality that could be seen on national TV this morning.
We announce to you from the Syrian news channel the victory of the great Syrian revolution after 13 years of patience and sacrifice. We won the bet and toppled the criminal Assad regime.
The announcement was preceded by a lightning campaign to take control of the country. The rebels closed in from the north and from the south. The Kurds advanced from the east.
Syrians have been subjected to injustice for 50 years, and this is a new day.
But what's shocking is how quickly all this emerged.
The operation met little resistance. This map shows how much territory was controlled by military forces within Syria before the rebellion started. On December 5th, Assad still controlled much of the country. But just 2 days later, rebels were approaching the capital, Damascus. And on Sunday, the entire country was controlled either by the rebels or by the Kurds.
That the civil war is going on for over 13 years. Assad's family has been in power for over 50. And Bashar al-Assad himself has been in power for 24 years. And within 1 week, Aleppo, Homs, Hama, Daraa, Damascus.
A government plane deported Damascus early Sunday, but disappeared from radar screens after a sharp descent near the city of Homs. Dictator Bashar al-Assad could have fled the country. Assad's ally Russia has confirmed his escape. Moscow said the dictator has given orders for a peaceful handover of power. But it doesn't seem that the Kremlin did anything to prevent this.
They lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine, where close to 600,000 Russian soldiers lay wounded or dead in a war they should never have started and could go on forever.
If we speak of Russia, he has lost one of the main strategic strongholds that it had in the Eastern Mediterranean, because the Tartus harbor in Syria is the base of the Russian fleet, which is fighting, if you want, or confronting the NATO fleet and the NATO nations.
The question now remains, what is next for Syria, a country ravaged by war for more than a decade?
There should start a transition period. We are not there yet. The opposition is very heterogeneous. They demonstrate unity now. But there are jihadist forces and but more moderate forces, and of course we have lots of ethnic groups in Syria.
Some Syrian refugees have already returned from neighboring Lebanon and Turkey. But the joy may not last too long. Having toppled their enemy, opposition figures will now have to cooperate with each other. If not, Syria may just see more violence. For TVP World, I'm Marek Steele.
No Polish citizens have requested evacuation from Syria, according to the Polish Foreign Ministry. Our reporter Ovidiusz Nicieja spoke to the ministry's spokesperson Paweł Wroński earlier today and has more.
The quickly developing situation in Syria is closely monitored by governments in Central Eastern Europe. Rebels claim to have captured the capital city of Damascus and toppled the government of Bashar al-Assad. And because of that, today the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs held a press conference, a press briefing, and the spokesperson for that ministry, Paweł Wroński, spoke about the situation of Polish citizens on the ground in Syria.
First of all, I want to send a message to the Polish citizens who are now on the territory of Syria are alive. Nobody is wanted. We have contact with some of them, and we wait of the developing of situation.
And how many people, how many Polish citizens are in Syria?
We estimate it's about 130, and our embassy have a contact with them.
Back in 2011, a civil war broke out in Syria, but since 2020, the front lines there have largely frozen, and the most recent offensive marks the most intense fighting since that period. So far, the rebels who claim to have captured the capital, Damascus, have not shown excessive brutality or hostility towards civilian population, nor towards the soldiers of the government, but the situation is changing there very quickly, and so it is also monitored by governments here in Central Eastern Europe.
In an interview with NBC News, US President-elect Donald Trump has once again suggested he might withdraw the United States from NATO if the European members don't, quote, pay their bills. This time, however, those bills are more than just a sufficient contribution to defense efforts. Speaking to NBC's 60 Minutes, Trump also said that while the US is defending Europe militarily, European countries are, in his eyes, importing too little from the United States. He specifically mentioned cars and food products as items. He wants Europe to treat the US, quote, fairly, suggesting he would consider the trade balance as a part of any NATO discussion. As Trump's plan for Ukraine remains unknown, the outgoing administration of President Joe Biden has announced a new $1 billion aid package for the country. The package includes drones and munitions for the HIMARS system. 43,000 soldiers, that's the heartbreaking toll Ukraine has paid in the fight against Russia since the full-scale invasion began. President Volodymyr Zelensky shared this staggering figure today on social media, along with the grim news that 370,000 have been wounded. As the situation in Ukraine intensifies, the international community is stepping up its efforts. European Council President Antonio Costa is calling on EU leaders to unite at a crucial summit in Brussels on December 19th.
This Sunday brought some dramatic news from Ukraine. For the first time, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died since the beginning of the war in February 2022.
This is what this war is about. It cannot be ended simply with a piece of paper and a few signatures. A ceasefire without guarantees can be reignited at any moment, as Putin has done before. To guarantee that the losses of Ukrainians will no longer continue, we need to ensure reliable peace and not turn a blind eye to occupation.
Ukraine has also seen 370,000 soldiers wounded in the conflict. Despite this, Zelensky highlighted the resilience of the Ukrainian forces, with nearly 50% of those wounded returning to battle. Brussels was also quite active this Sunday, with the new European Council President, Antonio Costa, calling on EU leaders to unite in his first European Council meeting in Brussels on December 19th. Costa emphasized that the meeting would send a strong message of solidarity with Ukraine, with President Zelensky joining to share the updates of his country's needs.
The situation in Ukraine will be at the forefront of our discussions. I have just returned from a visit to Kyiv on the first day of my mandate. We need to stand with Ukraine for as long as necessary and do whatever it takes for Russia's invasion to be defeated and international law to prevail.
As the situation in both Ukraine and the Middle East continues to evolve, all eyes are on Washington where the shift in leadership will be pivotal in shaping the next phase of the conflict. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badje.
To Georgia now, where pro-EU demonstrations continue, but incidents of violence against protesters are on the rise. On Saturday evening, masked attackers brutally assaulted peaceful demonstrators while the police stood by without intervening. Sonia Agata Biszczan has more.
This footage shows violence against protesters and journalists on the streets in Tbilisi. Hooded attackers also entered an office building and beat the protesters inside.
We got here police and the special forces and the people with the masks. And these people with the masks are people from the special forces who just take off their uniforms and wear some kind of just civilians forms with the masks. And their job is to run after the people and to beat them.
Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili strongly condemned the attacks against the protesters.
Unbearable to watch, indisputable proof, and yet still no reaction from police or responsible authorities. I call on the MIA to take immediate action in response to the atrocities unfolding on the streets and arrest those responsible without delay.
I think what we are witnessing right now in the streets of Tbilisi is nothing else than the state-sponsored terrorism against its own civilian population and peaceful demonstrators.
Claiming rigged elections, President Zurabishvili called the government illegitimate. For many, Georgia's ruling pro-Russian party, the Georgian Dream, is more than a setback for the country's EU aspirations. Numerous Georgians view the situation not as an isolated event, but as a potential threat of expanding Russian influence to other countries.
This is the Russian type of strategy, Russian type of scenario. It is not happening first time in Georgia. It has happened in 2014 in Ukraine. Same type of scenario.
Madam President.
During a meeting on Saturday,
thanks so much. How are you?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky voiced his support for Georgia.
We are with your people, of course, and on the side of your country always, your way of life and your choice of future EU membership in NATO.
Georgian protesters are urging international journalists to enhance their coverage, hoping this could help provoke a change.
We need the rest of the world to watch us. We need the attention. We need attention to survive because we're doing our best to make this change.
Although nearly 50 demonstrators were detained by the police on Friday and many were injured in the last days, the spirit of the Georgian people is not broken. For TVP World, Sonia Agata Biszczan.
The presidential elections in Romania, originally scheduled to be held today, were called off following the Constitutional Court's decision on Friday to nullify the first round, as the surprising victory of pro-Russian candidate Călin Georgescu raised concerns of Moscow interfering in the country's electoral process. Our correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski is on site in Bucharest. Welcome, Paweł, to our program. Tell us, please, what are the latest?
Well, no votes were cast in Romania today, but both presidential candidates who made it to the final runoff, which did not eventually happen, remained active throughout the day. Călin Georgescu, the highly controversial winner of the first round of presidential elections, appeared at his local polling station to protest the ruling of the Constitutional Court. Coincidentally, today is the Constitutional Day, the national holiday in Romania, and Georgescu said that there is nothing constitutional in Romania anymore. But let me remind you that the Constitutional Court rulings made on Friday nullified the first round of presidential elections because of Russian malign interference into the electoral process in Romania. And Călin Georgescu is now facing scrutiny, and his presidential campaign is facing scrutiny because he showed zero expenses on his presidential campaign and received preferential treatment from TikTok. Another contender, Elena Lasconi, who was a runner-up in the first round of presidential elections, said today that Romania's democracy proved to be fragile, but Romania cannot dance to Russia's tune. But Lasconi also made waves with her letter sent to Donald Trump, in which she said that she is a Romanian-loving candidate and she is looking to meet Trump and she's looking to establish personal relationship with him. Now, some experts believe that this letter shows Lasconi's lack of political judgment, as Romanians are increasingly voting for candidates and parties that promote independence over servility. But there are lessons learned from this failed attempt to elect the new president in Romania. Lessons learned on foreign influence, on foreign interference, on the influence of online portals on election campaigns in Europe. I actually spoke on the matter with Ambassador Adrian Zuckerman, a former US ambassador to Romania, and here's what he told me.
Several days ago, Viktor Orban of Hungary said publicly, "I am glad this happened in Romania because we can learn from it and protect ourselves in Hungary." Viktor Orban is very worried about what happened here and state-sponsored, I call it terrorism, hybrid attack. I am advised that similar types of attacks, but nothing remotely similar to the scale that happened in Romania, have taken place against a variety of European states, over 30 sometimes in the last year or so.
Now, the presidential elections in Romania will have to start from scratch. And for this to happen, first, the new parliament needs to be convened, the new parliament, which was elected exactly a week ago. Then the president will nominate the new prime minister. The president to do so will probably be Klaus Iohannis, the current president, who has already served 2 terms and was about to conclude his presidency just before Christmas. And once the new prime minister is nominated, then the new government shall be formed, and this new government will decide on the future date of presidential elections. Back to the studio.
Paweł Trzaskowski from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Paweł. Poland spins up its own munition manufacturing. Since the war in Ukraine has showcased that modern warfare requires large amounts of ammunition, NATO countries, including Poland, are now taking steps to expand their production capabilities. TVP World reporter Krzysztof Panek visited an explosive factory in northern Poland, and here's his report.
This chemical plant will soon produce nitrocellulose, an explosive used to propel shells out of a gun barrel. A preliminary agreement for its production was recently signed by a range of Polish defense companies, as they want to expand the production of ammunition in Poland.
For the last few months, we have been working to ensure that Poland has the capabilities to produce ammunition, especially the 155mm ammunition, which is now especially important. We can see the need for it from Ukraine's experience.
Currently, Poland does not produce the explosives used in propellant charges at all. It does, however, host the only factory in the European Union producing TNT, the explosive used in artillery and mortar shells.
Currently, our plant is able to cover the entirety of Polish armed forces' needs. We treat the Polish military's needs as a priority, and then we sell abroad whatever is left. About 85% of our sales are export. Our main clients are Western European countries, and the largest single one is the US.
The factory manufactures a range of explosives, chiefly TNT, from various chemical compounds. This critical area is off-limits to the press. The TNT is then put into empty munitions.
We pour liquefied TNT into large munitions. Like aerial bombs, we press solid TNT into small munitions like detonators. For the medium-sized munitions like the 155mm shell, we use semi-liquid TNT.
These empty shells are manufactured by a different plant, belonging to the same state-run Polish armaments group. The shells are then checked for any defects. Depending on the methods of filling them with TNT, some are X-rayed. They are then sent to a third plant, which equips them with fuses and finally supplies them to the Polish armed forces.
In recent years, we doubled our capacity to fill shells, and in the next few years we will double it once again.
As defects in ammunition might cause catastrophic malfunction, All chemical compounds used in the factory, as well as final products, are checked in an on-site lab.
We check nitric acid, sulfuric acid, as well as toluene, an organic compound found in crude oil. We also control things like cardboard and plastic bags, because they are also an important element.
Another company, a private initiative, is also working to begin artillery ammunition production in Poland. Negotiations to secure a government contract necessary to prepare a manufacturing line are ongoing.
Our company has been created in order to produce all components of the 155mm artillery shell in Poland. We could begin the production of entire shells in 2027. It is not possible to do this earlier because such production machines cannot be bought off the shelf.
While Poland operates a strategically important explosives factory, it does not possess the capability to fill all munition needs of its armed forces on its own. If the planned investments proceed without issue, this may soon change. Krzysztof Panek, TVP World.
It will go down in history as a stunning fall for the longtime dictator who kept rebel forces at bay for years with the help of Moscow and Tehran. Rebels opposed to Bashar al-Assad swept through the country in a lightning offensive, marking a dramatic breakthrough for factions that have been trying to unseat Assad for nearly 13 years. Joining me now to discuss the civil war in Syria and its consequences for the region and the world is Wojciech Cegielski, foreign news correspondent from Polish Radio. Good evening, Wojciech.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
yes,
Organization for the Liberation of the Levant, is believed, by the US at least, to be a terrorist group. Tell us, please, can they turn into pragmatism? What can we tell about this supposedly new government?
Well, they are turning to pragmatism right now, but I'm afraid it will be a short period of this pragmatism. This is a very loose coalition of Islamists. Basically, the name al-Nusra or al-Qaeda may sound familiar, and this is the inhabitant. This is the organization HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It's the organization established in 2020, but this is the organization which has roots in al-Qaeda and al-Nusra, the radical Islamist organizations. And this is the loose coalition of Islamists, Kurds, Druze, and other fractions, which conquered the Syria, as you've said, in the lightning offensive. But the question is, what's next? And I guess because there are so many differences, and because Syria went through horrible 15 years, at least, in this war, the differences, the emotions, the revenge will be at the top of the agenda for many different groups. We have to remember that it's not the organization like the Western-style organization, although it has its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who's currently been in one of the most iconic Damascus mosque, having a speech to all the Syrians. But this is the organization who is basically supported by Turkey, but also supported by other Islamists, by other very, very pragmatic, as for now, but very radical groups.
I know it's certainly very complicated with all those factions and ethnic minorities, but if you could tell us, please, who should not feel safe today in Syria?
Anybody. Syria is a patchwork of different groups: Sunni Muslims, Shia, Kurds, Alawites, who are, for sure, they are not feel very safe right now. Christians as well, because Christians, they always been the group which is very low profile level, but because of ISIS, because of al-Nusra and other radical groups who were in Syria, well, even before the Arab Spring, when it was launched in 2011, so Christians were affiliated with Assad because they have no choice. they have a choice between Assad and between radical Islamists. So they have always chosen Assad. So right now, I guess the first revenge wave, the first wave of revenge could turn into Alawites. That's for sure, because this is a small sect which the clan of Assad was from, and the Christians. But unfortunately for Syria and for all of Middle East, it could spill into a rivalry between even different Shia and different Sunni groups.
Okay, so Europe should expect another refugee crisis?
Yes, definitely. I guess the Christians would be the first to emigrate to Europe. It's a similar story to what is happening somewhere below the level in Bethlehem in Palestine, when Christians are the first one to immigrate because they are well educated, they know the languages, they have the skills, so they have a better chance to find a job. And most of them have their families in the West, somewhere in Germany, France, etc. So they are in a better position to emigrate. So I guess the Christians would be the first to emigrate to Europe because they have a better chance to settle down, to find a job and to survive.
So many foreign powers implied in this conflict, right? We have Russia, we have Iran, we have United States, Turkey, Israel. Why is Syria so important, and why everybody are really keeping attention to this particular country?
Because it is in the center of the Middle East, in a historical center in the Middle East, because it is on a crossroads between different conflicts. For example, the biggest Middle Eastern conflict between Shia and Sunni. Right now, the conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And all of the proxy wars who were ongoing in the Middle East focused in 2011, 2012, when the Arab Spring has happened, just in Syria. Because we have to remember, in case of Egypt, in case of Libya, in case of Tunisia, the Arab Spring was a relatively short one. In Egypt, protesters needed 30 days to overthrow Mubarak. In Libya, they needed a couple of months. In Syria, the Arab Spring have turned into very bloody civil war. So all of the proxies were there to fight.
500,000 people died, 1 million more fled. So now I would like to turn to Russia, because this is also important for our region with the fall of Assad and the latest development. Does this all weaken Russia, or you rather predict that all the troops deployed to Syria will now be somehow flown to Ukraine?
It's a massive blow for Russia, because Assad was one of the two main key allies in the Middle East. The second one is, of course, General Khalifa Haftar in Libya. So they lost Syria, they lost Tartus, the place when their fleet was based. I'm not sure if there were so many troops right now to fill the vacuum which they have because of Ukraine, because they were systematically pushing or taking them back to Russia because of Ukraine in the last 2 years.
And how about the naval bases?
Well, they remain empty.
So they lost access to them, right?
Many of Russian ships were evacuated from Tartus and other places within the last couple of days. So I guess they are on the way to Russia right now. Probably Russia has lost some of the equipment, but the most important one was already evacuated. So they haven't lost soldiers and shipments and equipment in a scale that will be a defeat for them, but they've lost a point of interest, point of influence in the Middle East.
Thank you very much.
Wojciech
Cegielski, thank you for taking your time tonight, especially on Sunday, but it's a very important issue. So that concludes this main edition of World News Tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.